show's on. But welcome, everybody. Thank you. So today's session, we're calling it InfoBites. It's a new series that Library Services is launching for the month of October. Last week, our colleague Ashley presented on keeping current with medical research. And today, myself, Deanna Townsend, will be talking about DynaMed and UpToDate. So we will get started. So my name is Deanna Townsend. I'm one of the medical librarians here with Library Services at Alberta Health Services. I'm located here at K Edmonton Clinic. Of course, I'm one of the librarians that work with Library Services throughout the province. Just a few little housekeeping items for today. Very privileged to have you all here for this session today. As I mentioned, this is a new series that we're launching this month of just short little webinars to help keep you current with medical research and tools and services that we offer here at Library Services. This session is going to be recorded today, just as our session was last week, and will be made available on our website at a later date. We do encourage questions in the session. As I mentioned, it is a short little 20-minute presentation. So if during the presentation you have any questions, if you don't mind just popping those into the chat, and I will address them at the end during our Q&A. During the Q&A as well, if you'd rather just unmute yourself and ask questions of me, that's great. I welcome that. And if we don't get to your question, not a problem at all. You can just email me or Library Services, and we will make sure that we address any question you might have. And as I mentioned, this is a new series that we're launching, and we do have a short evaluation that we really appreciate you filling out for us. The link will be popped into the chat for you, and you can fill out that evaluation. We really take your feedback seriously, and we'll make any changes to future education sessions based on that feedback. So appreciate that. Just like to start with a land acknowledgement as well and encourage you to acknowledge your own positions. We would like to recognize that our work takes place on historical and contemporary Indigenous lands, including the territories of Treaty 6, 7, and 8, and the homeland of the Métis Regions 1 through 6. We also acknowledge the many Indigenous communities that have been forged in urban centers across Alberta. So welcome your own acknowledgements as well. Thank you. So in today's session, what I hope you'll gain is a better understanding of DynaMed as an evidence-based clinical guidance tool, and to look at this tool in comparison to another tool that's very popular, UpToDate. And then to recognize how well DynaMed has been integrated into Alberta Health Services systems, and then how our services, Library Services, can provide any additional support that you might need in using this tool or any of the other tools and resources that we have to support your evidence-based practice. So just taking a look at where DynaMed sits in terms of resources and tools, it would be considered a point of care resource. So these resources offer rapid consultation at the point of care delivery with the best evidence presented in a more concise, easy to use format. The point of these tools is to really give you the most accurate and current evidence that you can apply in clinical practice. When you consider these tools, within the evidence pyramid, they sit right at the very top. So when you're looking at the evidence pyramid and considering research and where it fits for your clinical work, at the bottom of the pyramid, of course, is all that non-pre-appraised research. So the primary studies that you're looking at. This is research that has not had any evidence processing, and really that critical appraisal lies on the reader, lies on the user to ascertain the relevancy, the trustworthiness, trustworthiness, all of those elements that you take into account in critical appraisal, that is all on your shoulders when you're doing primary research. And as you move up the pyramid, of course, we look at more of that pre-appraised research, so syntheses and synopses, and then at the very top is the summaries and guidelines. Excuse me, and that's where DynaMed and UpToDate sit, right at that top of the pyramid where there's been substantial evidence processing, there's less to sift through, and a lot of that critical appraisal has been really done for you. So two resources that are well known in this regard, of course, are DynaMed and UpToDate. Now, the impetus to presenting today is not about how you search in these tools, but really why we have one tool as our institutional subscription and perhaps not another. And we often get this question. We often get the question about accessing UpToDate. So, of course, this is a very popular, UpToDate is a very popular clinical decision resource. It's undergone extensive marketing by Wolters Kluwer Health, and even have made some marketing claims that UpToDate is the only evidence-based resource associated with improved clinical outcomes. Now, UpToDate is a very useful clinical decision-making tool, but there are some institutional access barriers to this tool, and one of them is very high subscription costs. Now, that shouldn't be confused with it being a better resource. DynaMed is much more accessible in terms of subscription costs for institutions, but there is valuable discussion around the evidence behind these clinical decision-making tools and how we decide one subscription over another. The Association of Faculties of Medicine of Canada Network on Libraries conducted an environmental scan in 2015 and an update in 2022. And they released a position paper related to the existing evidence on UpToDate and the related tools. And in the position paper, the AFMC librarians considered the evidence related to this category of resources for evidence decision-making. And they felt very confident that they did not need to endorse UpToDate for their organizations because there just simply wasn't the evidence to choose this resource, UpToDate, over other point-of-care resources. The evidence wasn't there. So when we look at that and start to unpack that evidence, it's of value to look at some comparative studies. The AFMC network did look at these comparative studies, one by Baxter et al. In 2022 and the other by Bradley Ridout et al. In 2021. And in these crossover studies, the participants were physicians and residents, and they used both these tools in comparison, looking at the quality of the information, the assessment of the level of evidence, so that really what you want to know when making clinical decisions, the ease of use, and the overall experience in using these tools. What they found in comparing the tools was that DynaMed did demonstrate equivalency to UpToDate in the accuracy of the answers, the quality of that information, and the ability to assess the level of evidence. So they were equivalent. But what they also found was that the participants preferred UpToDate. They preferred UpToDate because they felt they had greater confidence in the answer, that it took them less time to acquire that answer, and that they had easier use with the interface. So why is that? Well, in these studies, it was determined that the participants had significant product recognition, that they were familiar with the content, organization, and interface of UpToDate, and therefore felt more confidence with that tool. UpToDate, of course, is highly recognized and marketed in the medical community, marketed to medical students, residents, and even in the Canadian Medical Association and in these comparative studies, the vast majority of the participants had experience with UpToDate. And so that prior knowledge of the interface and the familiarity with the organization of the content led them to feel more confident in the answers they were. But is that evidence? Not sure if that is. Let's unpack some of that. So one of the issues or one of the things that participants said was that they were more confident in the answer they received in UpToDate. So let's look at UpToDate and at DynaMed and the evidence-based methodology behind the information within these tools. So evidence in clinical decision-making tools should be easy to navigate with management profiles, summaries, and recommendations with levels of evidence that are apparent and easily recognizable and links to primary studies. DynaMed offers this with a few advantages, and it's demonstrated that their levels of evidence are easily recognizable and identified with links to primary studies that are easily met. UpToDate offers a similar organization of the content, but the levels of evidence do require a secondary search within that reference, which is fine, but not as accessible as in DynaMed. If we want to take a look at the evidence-based methodology behind DynaMed's content, we can look at how that information is synthesized, summarized, and evaluated, and it is comparable to UpToDate. It is systematically, all the evidence is systematically identified and interpreted by clinical experts, so physicians and methodologists partnered with McMaster University, so there's a lot of confidence in that, where this team monitors medical research and then critically appraises and evaluates the research trustworthiness, relevance, and clinical value. So all that critical appraisal is being done by the systematic literature surveillance team for you, and you can have confidence in that. And they also offer a transparent level of evidence rating system so that you can identify where it sits within the levels of evidence. This has been shown to be comparative to UpToDate's methodology. When Quigg and et al. Reviewed this, evaluated the point of care resources, UpToDate and DynaMed included, and found that DynaMed maintained the largest total number of references, the largest proportion of current references, with the highest proportion of topics from recently published articles and with the fastest updating speed. And this is made apparent on the tool. So that's the confidence in the evidence. So feeling confident in the answer that you receive from that tool. But additionally, users in the comparative studies felt that it took them a little less time to acquire that clinical answer, and it was a bit easier to use UpToDate. Now, that's not necessarily about evidence, that's more about familiarity with a tool, but it's very useful to take a look at these tools and what they have to offer. So when you're using a tool and you want evidence for your clinical decision-making, what you might want to look for are streamlined topics and personalized features so that you can personalize to your clinical specialty. DynaMed does offer this. Of course, this sounds maybe a little bit like a sales pitch. Maybe it is, but it is also about how this tool really functions in clinical practice. So DynaMed does have topic updates and algorithms that are easily identified and highlighted via tab selection, which is very similar to how UpToDate organizes its information. It has topic updates. However, the research related to the update is not explicitly highlighted as it is in DynaMed. So there are a few nuances. So once you get used to the interface, you can see how that changes. If you were able to attend our session last week by my colleague Ashley, she's talked about staying current with medical research and highlighted DynaMed's practice alert feature. And that's the component of really personalizing a tool to your clinical specialty. So in DynaMed, you can personalize the features. There's updates and alerts for clinical specialties and clinical evidence with potential practice changing evidence that gets updated regularly. And there's clear and concise, actionable information that you would apply then to clinical practice. So DynaMed does offer those streamlined topics and updates that you are looking for when you're making those evidence-based decision-making choices. So when we look at what the AFMC uncovered in their environmental scan, we look at some of the comparative research that's been done on point-of-care resources, UpToDate and DynaMed included. All the perceived advantages of UpToDate really lie in familiarity with the interface rather than the evidence behind the information. So the concerns that were brought up by participants in the comparative research around confidence in the evidence behind the answer, less time to answer a clinical question, and ease of use really lie within a familiarity of the tool as opposed to the methodology behind the information. And so it's more about getting personal with the interface as opposed to any kind of evidence around the information. And that's the part that we care about, right? Is the evidence and the information. So this is really an easy barrier to surmount. We can meet this. We can actually become familiar with this tool quite easily because it is really well integrated into AHS systems. It's fully integrated into Connect Care. It has accessibility with mobile applications as well as desktop shortcuts, which allow you to integrate it well into your workflows. Additionally, our services, library services, is really here to help you become comfortable with these tools. So we regularly offer throughout the year a DynaMed course that allows you to learn how to search for clinical information within this tool, how you can personalize that to your clinical specialty. Our next session is in December, but we offer this throughout the year. But our team is also really more than happy to sit down with you individually or with your team to go over how you can integrate DynaMed into your clinical decision-making workflows, how you can get comfortable with that interface, and how this tool can really be used on a regular basis to help you with your evidence-based clinical decision-making. So we're here to help you get really personal and familiar with DynaMed. So you can visit us virtually, of course, because we're everywhere in this province, but we also have sites, library sites throughout the province in Edmonton and Red Deer and Calgary. So you can stop by and visit us anytime. Have my list of references if you're interested in looking at some of these comparative studies. And as I mentioned, this is a new series of webinars that we're offering this month. Last week's session was recorded and that will be made available to you. This session was recorded as well, so you can share that and view that. Next week, our colleague Erica is going to talk about searching for clinical practice guidelines, another really key thing for your evidence-based practice. And then closing out the month, our colleague Rachel will be talking about how literature searching is really a partnership between the researcher and the librarian and